Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing 5 types of meals I eat each week. It's no surprise one of those is avocado toast. So this is my avocado toast with oyster mushroom bacon and vegan feta cheese. For the mushroom bacon, I made a marinade with 1 heaped teaspoon of white miso paste along with 1 tablespoon of tomato puree, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, a teaspoon of garlic puree, a teaspoon of oil, a teaspoon of liquid smoke, a teaspoon of soy sauce, a teaspoon of maple syrup, and then a good season of salt and ground black pepper. I gave that a good mix together until well combined. Then I took my oyster mushrooms. These are great for mushroom bacon because of their texture and size. And so I just brush a griddle pan with a little oil and place them in. I usually have some vine tomatoes going on in there as well. I first try and cook as much water out of the mushrooms as possible, and then I flip them over so the cooked side is facing up, and I brush that side with the marinade. Repeat that on them all, and then I flip them over and do the same on the other side. They do shrink when cooking, so when they begin to get a little sticky from the marinade, I then combine 2 mushrooms together to create like one big piece of mushroom bacon. I then just slice and toast some seeded bread. Then I take my avocado and smash that up on it. Then I add my smoky oyster mushroom bacon on the top. I then take some vegan feta. This is Violife's Greek white block. It's incredible. And I just use a fork to crumble that on top. If you can't get this, you could make like a cashew cheese and crumble that over. That works just as well. Then I sprinkled over some chili flakes and some seeds that were left in the bag from the bread. I also snipped some fresh chives over and added on some salt and pepper, and then the grilled vine tomatoes. This is either like a weekday lunch or a weekend brunch for me. I definitely have avocado toast more than once a week in some form, but I really love mushrooms on avocado toast. Mushroom bacon is probably my favourite. It's essentially mushrooms in a smoky sauce, but it's a great bacon alternative. I've also shared recipes for harissa mushrooms and miso mushrooms on toast. Both of those are delicious too, but this with the creamy feta, the oniony chives, a kick of chilli, and then the juicy grilled tomatoes is all so good together. I also make a curry at least twice a week. So this is my lentil and coconut dal with spiced potatoes. For the dal, I heated 2 tablespoons of groundnut oil in a pan on a medium heat. I then took my spices and I used a tablespoon of garam masala, 2 teaspoons each of ground cumin, ground coriander and paprika, then 1 teaspoon of ground ginger. I then mix those through the oil and toast them until they smell beautiful. I then added in a tablespoon of garlic puree. I took a green chilli, de-seeded it and finely minced that up. Then added that in along with a good pinch of sea salt. I stirred those through and then fried them off. I then took a cup of red lentils and I just rinsed those under running water in a sieve. I always rinse until the water runs clear, and then I drained off any excess water, then added those to the pan as well. I stirred those through the spices, then I took a can of peeled plum tomatoes. Obviously any canned tomatoes will work, but I usually just rinse the can out with a little water to get all of the juice too. Then I break the tomatoes up with a spoon to make it nice and smooth. Next I poured in a pint of vegetable stock, and then I added in a can of full fat coconut milk, another good pinch of salt, and then gave it a good stir through. I then leave that on a low heat uncovered to cook for around an hour. While that's cooking, I make the spiced potatoes. I peeled and roughly quartered 8 white potatoes for this. I had a large pan of boiling water on the go, so I added a pinch of salt to that and then added in the potatoes and just let them boil for around 5 minutes. I then drained off the water and gave them a good shake in the pan with the lid on to rough up the edges a bit. I placed those in a baking dish, and then back in the pan I added 2 tablespoons of ground nut oil, then a teaspoon each of mustard seeds and cumin seeds, then 1/4 teaspoon of fennel seeds, and I just toasted those off on a medium heat for 2 minutes. I then added in a teaspoon of paprika and a teaspoon of turmeric and a good pinch of salt, and then I stirred those through. I next added the boiled potatoes back into the pan with a good crack of black pepper, gave them a good shake and turned them through the toasted spices. Then I placed them back in the baking dish and in my preheated oven at 180 degrees Celsius to roast for around 30 minutes until all golden and crispy. Once done, I removed them and scattered over some chopped fresh coriander. After an hour, the dal is looking a little something like this. I usually season to taste one last time and give it a final stir. I love this with some basmati rice, and then I add on the spiced potatoes and then the dal. I also added on what was left in the bottom of the potato baking dish, some little like crispy potato bits, some coconut yogurt as well, some chili flakes and some chopped coriander. The dal I find makes 4 portions too, so I usually freeze the other half for a quick dinner once defrosted and reheated another night. Like I said, an Indian or a Thai inspired curry is something I'll make at least twice a week as a dinner. But if it's Indian, it's usually a chickpea or lentil curry. These spiced potatoes are great as a side dish. I just love everything in one bowl though. They're crispy on the outside, fluffy in the middle, have so much flavour and work so nicely with the creamy coconutty lentil dal. Another meal I definitely have every week is a noodle stir fry, and this is my tofu chicken and vegetable noodles. I made a marinade for the tofu chicken with 2 tablespoons of garlic puree mixed with 2 tablespoons of sesame oil, a tablespoon of rice vinegar, a tablespoon of maple syrup, a teaspoon of soy sauce, a teaspoon of ground ginger, a teaspoon of chili flakes, a teaspoon of cornflour and a good pinch of salt and ground white pepper, and I combined that with around a tablespoon of water until it's smooth. And then I took a large bowl and a block of firm tofu, and what I do is just break the tofu up by tearing off chunks into the bowl. I then poured in around 2/3 of the marinade and just reserved the other third. Then I just turned the tofu through it gently to get it well coated. I took a non-stick baking tray and spread the coated tofu out on it evenly, and then I just placed that in the oven to bake for around 20 to 25 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius. Then to a wok, I heated 1 tablespoon of ground nut oil, added in 150 grams of shiitake mushrooms and just fried those off. I then took a green and red bell pepper, trimmed them and sliced them up into chunky strips, and then added those into the pan with the mushrooms next. I gave everything a good stir together and continued to fry it all off. I also then gave the tofu a good shuffle halfway through. I put some noodles in to cook in boiling water. These were actually udon noodles. While the noodles were cooking, I took 100 grams of baby corn and just halved those. Then they went in the pan, and again I just continued to fry everything off. Once the noodles were cooked, I just drained those and added those into the pan and tossed them through the veg. I then poured in the rest of the marinade as like a sauce, and I just turned that through too. Once the tofu was done, I removed that from the oven and added it to the pan. and mix the pieces through. That's pretty much it. This makes 2 portions, and I like to top mine with some spring onions, some toasted cashew nuts, sesame seeds, and a wedge of lime. This is a reasonably simple stir fry. I feel it's just really fresh with all the crunchy veg. The texture of the baked tofu is my fave. It's amazing, and this marinade adds loads of flavour. The fresh lime juice squeezed over just adds some zestiness and zinginess. The spring onion adds even more flavour, and then the toasted cashews and sesame again add some crunch. So if I do a quick, simple noodle stir fry as a weekly dinner, it's definitely something along these lines. Something else I make weekly all year round is soup, and this is my sweet potato, coconut and ginger soup. For this I heated 2 tablespoons of oil in a large pan. I then finely diced a white onion and I added that in along with 3 cloves of minced garlic, and I just softened those down. I next grated in a thumb-sized piece of fresh ginger, added in 1 sliced green chilli, and continued to fry everything off together. I next added in 2 teaspoons of turmeric and turned that through the pan to get everything well coated in it. Then I took 2 medium sweet potatoes and peeled them, then cut them into cubes and added those to the pan along with a large pinch of sea salt and black pepper, then gave them a good stir through the pan. I next poured in a pint of vegetable stock and added in a can of full fat coconut milk, then gave everything another good stir through and brought it to a gentle simmer. Just before blending it up, I threw in a good handful of fresh coriander, stalks included, and then a ladle at a time I transferred the soup over to my Vitamix and blended it up. You might need to do this in 2 separate batches depending on your blender. I blended it until it was nice and creamy and smooth, and then I poured it back into the pan to heat through and seasoned it some more. And then once hot, I served that up. Again, this can make 4 decent sized portions, so I freeze a batch for another easy meal another time. I usually add in some coconut yogurt, a drizzle of chili oil, then some fresh chili, coriander and chopped spring onion, some pumpkin seeds and some black pepper. This is definitely more of an autumn winter kind of soup, but I would weirdly still eat this in the spring, in the summer, any time of year. I love soups because they're so nutritious and I always feel my best self after a nourishing bowl of soup. And this is one of my favourites. Sometimes I'll make it with butternut squash, or I'll add some curry powder in with the turmeric, or even some curry paste for like a curried version, which is also delicious. There's so many flavours: the creamy sweet potato with the coconut milk, a kick of chili and ginger, and then the freshness of the coriander and spring onion on the top with the cool coconut yogurt is amazing. And lastly, I very regularly make a ragu or pasta bolognese, and this is my pasta with a meaty tempeh ragu. For this I started by warming 2 tablespoons of oil in a pan. I then peeled and finely diced a large shallot. That went in the pan, and then I also peeled a carrot and diced that up into small pieces. I added that in too, and then did the same with a stick of celery. Just minced that up and added that into the pan as well. I kind of just sauteed those off until they softened down, and then I peeled and minced 2 cloves of garlic, and I added that into the pan and just turned everything through. I next added 2 teaspoons of paprika, a teaspoon of dried mixed herbs and a bay leaf, and then I just turned those through the pan to get everything well coated. I next added in 6 minced up sun-dried tomatoes in their oil and a tablespoon of tomato puree, and then seasoned with a good pinch of salt and a crack of black pepper, and stirred that through as well, just lightly frying it off. Next, I poured in a 1/4 cup of red wine. Make sure that wine is vegan friendly. A lot of them are labelled vegan now, and this is optional, but it just gives a really rich taste. Instead of the wine though, you could use, say, a tablespoon of soy sauce and a tablespoon of vegan Worcester sauce. I just cook the alcohol off until it's evaporated, and then I stir it through before adding in a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. I next took my block of tempeh. I like to lightly boil this for around 5 minutes, which just helps remove any bitter taste tempeh can sometimes have. So I just pop it in some boiling water, and then once it's done, I remove it and leave it to cool before then grating it up. Alternatively, you could just break this up with your hands into small pieces. But once all grated, I then added that into the pan and stirred it through everything to get it all well combined, and I fried that off for a little bit. Then I poured in a can of tomatoes. I love using chopped tomatoes with added things like garlic and herbs for even more flavour, and then I just filled the can halfway with water and just rinsed it out. I next crumbled in a vegetable stock cube and I poured in a pint of water. I gave that another good stir and left that to simmer gently for around 30 minutes on a low heat until it thickens and becomes even more rich. Meanwhile, I just cooked my pasta in some boiling salted water. I just did 2 portions here, and then when the pasta was a couple of minutes away from being ready, I took a 1/4 cup of the pasta water and added that into the sauce. Then I drained the pasta off and added it into the sauce. I gave that a gentle stir through until it was well coated, and then I served that with some finely grated vegan cheese over the top, and I also picked some fresh basil leaves to go on the top too. A tempeh ragu or bolognese is such a great meat alternative. The texture is so similar and the tempeh just soaks up all of those good flavours. I've also shared a tempeh bolognese lasagna recipe before, which so many of you loved, and this is just as good. It's such a rich and flavourful meaty sauce. But if I'm not using tempeh, I will use either mushrooms or lentils instead. And that's it for the 5 types of meals I eat each week. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye!